I'm going to make a little update video here on this Stihl ms362c. The first video you see, I put the bark box on it last night, and I put the soft air cleaner on it, and I didn't run it too much, just ran a little bit, and man, it's incredible what a difference this makes. Throttle response, you can tell it's going to have a lot more power. One thing I'm not seeing a lot of, you'll find if you Google bark boxes and YouTube, you'll find a lot of guys that show you how to put them on their saws and stuff, but no one's really, I haven't seen anyone talk about how if you change that a little bit, if you modify your saw, you really need to recalibrate it. So if you have a carbureted saw, you need to adjust the carburetor so that the saw is running properly. You know, now that it's breathing more, you want to make sure you're not over, you know, the saw's not over revving. Well, this saw, this ms362 has the M-tronic, so there's a very specific way to get it to recalibrate itself, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. If you look it up online, you'll find the instructions for these saws. Mine is the M3.0, so if you have one that's older than that, like an M2.0, there's different instructions, slightly different way you have to calibrate the saw, but I'll show you that here in just a minute. So I'm going to recalibrate it, I'm going to sharpen the chain, and then I've got a bunch of oak logs over here that I'm working on bucking up for firewood, and so I'm going to start bucking that up today and start splitting it. So our company, we're an excavating and grading company. So I've got a few tractors, a couple excavators, skid steer, you can kind of see over there. But this thing here, this is my uncle's tractor. This thing here is actually pretty cool. This is a 1947 Caterpillar D4. And it's got the gas pony motor. Obviously you get that running, and then once it's running good, you engage it into the engine, get the engine turning over, and then switch it over to run and get fuel flowing to the engine, and it just starts right up. We had this thing running 2 days ago. This thing just runs incredible. Absolutely no smoke out of the exhaust. I mean, it just sits here and purrs. So anyway, this video is about the saw, but just a little side note I thought everyone might like to see. You just don't see these dozers around too much anymore. Obviously this dozer came from the factory without the ROPS on it. Somebody added that at some point, which I think makes it look, really cool. Makes it look like an even more stout dozer. But anyway, pretty cool. Maybe we'll make a video one of these days of this thing starting up and running. But let's focus on the saw here. I'm gonna sharpen the chain, and I'll show you how to do the calibration on this so that it's running properly for these modifications we made. Just make sure you have the scabbard off, obviously, and with your brake set, your brake engaged, you put the throttle in the cold start position, you start the saw, let it run like that for 30 seconds, no more than 60 seconds. Then after that, you release the brake and release the throttle, but it says you hold the throttle, pin the throttle for another 30 to 60 seconds. It says you'll hear the chainsaw changing RPM, adjusting itself, and then after you hear a substantial drop in RPMs, you can take your hand off the throttle, set the brake, and shut the saw off, and the instructions say that it is calibrated at that point. So I don't see anything in there about cold start or warming up. I'm gonna warm up the saw, just let it idle a little bit. I can't stand to start up the saw and go full throttle right off the bat if it's not warmed up. So I'm gonna just let it idle for a minute, warm it up, and then I'll do that calibration process. So okay, so this is the calibration process for the Stihl ms362c, and this is version 3.0. so this is the calibration method for this saw. So if you have a 2.0 or 2.1 or older, the version is different. If it's a 3.0, the calibration is different. So just make sure you have the calibration method matches your saw. Oh, just as far as calibrating, again, in the videos I've seen of guys putting on bark boxes and air cleaners, I haven't found anybody that talks about needing to calibrate your saw. So I know I mentioned it earlier, but again, even if your saw is carbureted, or you've got the M-tronic, where you can't adjust it manually, either way, you still need to recalibrate your saw anytime you make any changes to it. So obviously with the bark box and the air cleaner, this saw is getting a lot more air, a lot more intake. The exhaust is going out faster, so naturally your RPMs are going to be higher, but you want to let the saw recalibrate itself so that you don't burn up the saw. So it's just an important step. Maybe you won't burn up the saw, but in the instructions from Stihl, even if you just do a little tune-up, if you just change the fuel filter, you're supposed to recalibrate the saw. Any little change to the saw that might affect how it runs, it needs to recalibrate and run properly. So that makes sense. So just keep that in mind so that you can potentially get the most life out of your saw possible. So let's do the calibration. I'm going to start it up with the brake set in the cold start position. The throttle will be in the cold start position. We're going to let it run that way for 30 seconds, no more than 60. So I'm going to kind of count off in my head. Then once we hit 30 seconds, I'm going to disengage the brake, and then I'm going to squeeze the throttle. So I'm going to give it full throttle for another 30 seconds. And we should be able to hear the saw adjusting its RPM. And after 30 seconds, we should hear the saw kick down its RPMs a little bit. At that point, we can let it idle, set the brake, shut the saw off. It's supposed to be calibrated at that point. So let's go for it. Let's see what happens here. Brake is set. Throttle is in the cold start position. So there you have it. I'm going to assume that that's calibrated because we heard it kick the RPMs up all of a sudden for a few seconds, then it kicked the RPMs down. So I assume that at that point it was calibrated. I held the throttle because I thought it might do it again, and we all heard it kick the RPMs up and it just held there. And I counted, I think I counted about 45. So, and in the instructions it says it should do it within 30 seconds. So I'm going to assume it's calibrated. I might run it a little bit and then just see, and might try it again just to make sure that, but it did exactly what the instructions said. You'll hear the RPMs fluctuate a little bit. The RPMs will kick up, and then all of a sudden the RPMs will kick down. So I assume the first time those RPMs kicked way down, that's when it was finished with its calibration. But I kept holding the throttle, not knowing if it needed to do that a couple of times, and it obviously never kicked the RPM down again. So I assume the saw is calibrated. Like I said, I might try it again later after I run the saw just a little bit to make sure. But again, I'm no expert. Check out guys like Buckin' Billy Ray Smith. He puts out awesome content. He'll teach you all kinds of stuff about your saws. I'm fortunate enough too. My cousin is a tree guy, Jesse. Crown Tree Service, I think, is the name of his business. But he's got a vast array of knowledge. Again, I'm not an expert tree guy, not an expert saw guy, but I love saws, love running these saws, and I want to learn as much as I can, even though I'll never have a full-blown career in cutting trees. But like I said, sometimes we do land clearing projects. We're always cutting firewood, so cutting firewood serving a purpose, but I have a lot of fun with it as well. Yes, it's hard work, but I love working hard. So anyway, there you have it. I will a little bit here. I'm going to sharpen this chain, and then I'll make a video cutting some of these oak logs, bucking up some oak, and let's see how the saw goes through it with the new bark box and the air cleaner. Well, while we're at it, how about a little sharpening in the video? I've been hand filing my saws for the last several years. I used to use a little 12-volt grinder, but there's nothing like hand filing, especially if you know how to do it right. And again, thanks to the advice I've gotten from guys like Buckin' Billy Ray on YouTube and my cousin Jesse, who's a really good tree guy. You know, he taught me a couple tricks recently even that makes it just even easier and just gets the saw cutting just right. So this saw's still cutting pretty good, but I've had a couple tanks of gas through it. So I'm just going to touch up this chain a little bit. You know, obviously it's easier if you tune it up. You know, don't let the chain get so terrible where you have to spend, you know, half an hour sharpening teeth. But anyway, one thing I used to do is I used to be a stickler on following the angle on the tooth there. And that's okay, but you got to be careful. My chain, the teeth, I was getting it to where I was getting such a steep angle, and my cousin pointed that out to me, showed me, you know, it's okay to keep your cutting edge, the tooth there, keep it a little bit more square. So you don't have to follow that angle dead nuts exactly. I mean, maybe you open it up a little bit, but whatever you do, you want to just try to keep as much of a square edge on this tooth here. It's going to cut better. So what I like to do now, since my cousin showed me this, and it has just made sharpening so much easier, you know, I got the bar tip kind of wedged there in my bed just so it won't move around so much, but clean up the gullet. Get that gullet first. As Buckin' Billy Ray always says, get the gullet. Get that gullet. Don't be afraid to take some material out of there. And really, I used to count strokes. And again, the way my cousin showed me here how to file, you don't have to be so concerned with counting strokes. But if you get that tooth, that cutting edge looking really good, and you get them all the same, the saw is going to cut really good, and it's not going to pull one way or another. So I'm just kind of watching that top edge, getting it, if it's curved a little bit or jagged, I'm just working it over so I get just a nice square razor edge. And you know, you can tell a sharp chain when it's just a little bit sticky. So again, I'm no expert. Take this for what it's worth. There's many ways to sharpen a chain. Some guys are like Buckin, actually, which was kind of new to me, the concept of square file, and I might try that one day. I kind of like it. It looks really neat. It works really good for Buckin. But anyway, Buckin, if you happen to see this video, I just can't thank you enough for all your content, spreading kindness, and you're so much fun to watch. Thank you so much for all the good, clean content you put out, and keep them coming. I mean, I can't get enough of your channel. So thanks for the education, and it's entertaining. And anyway, If you haven't seen Buckin' Billy Ray on YouTube, go check him out. He's awesome. Buckin' Billy Ray Smith. Check out his channel. He's awesome. Anyway, let's do a little more sharpening here. Them like that, and it's true. You know, the more square your tooth is, it's going to be grabbing and biting more wood. So the other thing is, after you do this, of course, check your rakers. And I don't really use a raker gauge. I do like to throw it on there once in a while just to see where I am in relation. But, you know, just be careful not to take too much. You can always take more off your raker. If you sharpen your chain and you're like, well, I think it could take more wood, maybe make one more pass on all your rakers. And, you know, make sure they're just angled forward a little bit, if anything. Again, I had them angled back a little bit, and my cousin pointed that out to me. But if you take your raker down too much, you're going to have a chain that doesn't work very good. You'd have to sharpen the teeth, and you're going to lose life out of your teeth. You'd have to sharpen the teeth down to get it back to where it matches up with your raker. You know, because if the raker's too low, it's trying to take too much wood. It's just not going to, could be dangerous as well. So check your rakers every time you sharpen. You know, maybe check them out, maybe give them a pass, but be careful not to take them down too much. So, all right, I'm going to shut up and stop talking.